The first time the F-22 Raptor was cleared for a covert sortie over the mountains of Afghanistan, almost no one outside a small circle of Air Combat Command planners knew about it. The jet had been designed to hunt enemy aircraft, Soviet-style fighters, advanced radar arrays, and hostile air forces with full command and control networks. But here, in late 2002, the battlefield was different. Unlit caves, narrow valleys, freezing crosswinds, and insurgent teams dug into rock the way ancient armies hid from invading empires. In the thin air above Tora Bora, the war felt prehistoric, modern, and postmodern all at once. The fragility of a 21st century stealth jet meeting fighters who relied on mules and runners. The glowing HUD symbols inside the Raptor, contrasting with the absence of any electronic signature from the ground. The American pilots joked that the mountains were alive, that if you flew too close, they swallowed radar returns, devoured sound, and sent back nothing but static. But the joking ended once the intelligence packets arrived at Bagram. The first target package was simple on paper. Verify the location of a suspected Al-Qaeda tunnel system carved into a Qina ridgeline. Satellite passes had shown what looked like entrances, dark ovals the size of truck bays, but the angles were wrong. Shadows had the real contours. Thermal imagery showed heat blooming from rock even at night, but that could have been sun-soaked stone. Analysts needed line-of-sight confirmation from an angle no satellite could achieve. That angle had to come from the Raptor. Major Dalton Reeves had been among the first pilots cleared for the mission. At 40, he was older than most of the squadron, older than the jet itself, but he possessed the quiet confidence ACC loved. Calm in the cockpit, methodical in decision-making, and capable of holding a secret tighter than a flight plan. For this sortie, secrecy wasn't just expected. It defined the mission. He received a briefing in a plywood room built inside a hangar at Bagram Airfield, the air thick with the smell of JP-8 dust and the distant hum of generators. A single projector displayed the ridgeline, gray, jagged, cruel in its simplicity. "Reeves, here's your problem set," said the intel officer. "We need confirmation of these openings. Satellites are giving us false positives. Predator feeds are too low-res. You're the only aircraft that can get the angle." Reeves leaned closer. "Stealth isn't necessary." "Stealth is always necessary," the officer answered. "But this isn't about hiding from radar. It's about flying where nothing else can fly." He meant it literally. The Raptor's thrust vectoring, its power-to-weight ratio, and its ability to sustain altitude made it capable of maneuver that wasn't in any standard tactics manual. A silent, looping, high G-arc through a valley so narrow that if Reeves misjudged the radius by even 2 meters, the wings would shear off against the rock. This was not what Lockheed Martin designers had imagined when they first sketched the sleek airframe on drafting tables in the 1990s. But wars rarely respected design intentions. Reeves lifted off shortly after 0200. The moon was a thin blade in the sky. Ground crews watched the Raptor slide down the runway and disappear into the dark without afterburner glow, just a shadow that left the Earth as quietly as a ghost leaving a room. Inside the cockpit, the world became numbers, altitude tapes, airspeed streams, oxygen flow, radar returns, and silence. The silence was what unnerved Reeves the most. Even on long transits over the Pacific during training, the Raptor had always felt like it was whispering, subtle vibrations, the soft roar of engines muffled by geometry and physics. But over Afghanistan, the silence became absolute. His onboard ASA radar, optimized for air targets, returned nothing. The valley walls absorbed his signals like ancient fortresses swallowing arrows. Even his passive sensor struggled. When he reached the designated IP initial point, the drone operators in Nevada joined the frequency. Raptor 1. Predator has eyes on your ingress. Terrain turbulence expected on your right vector. Reeves smirked. "Copy. Mountains breathing hard today." He descended to an altitude no jet of this class was supposed to attempt in combat. The valley tightened. He felt the wind shear pummel the fuselage. The Raptor compensated with micro-adjustments, tiny control surface corrections faster than any pilot could manually input. Then he saw the openings. They weren't cave mouths. They were doors. Man-made, reinforced, camouflaged with rock slurry and brush. Reeves steadied the aircraft, tilted the nose by fractions of a degree, and activated a classified imaging mode normally used for tracking enemy fighters through cloud cover. The sensor was never meant for ground structures, but the Air Force had modified it for this experimental run. A grainy outline appeared on the HUD. Human silhouettes, heat signatures, weapons resting against the interior wall. He exhaled slowly. Predator control, be advised. Target entrances confirmed. Sending captures now. On the other end of the encrypted channel, controllers cursed under their breath. The still images Reeves transmitted, ultra-high angle, undistorted, thermally enhanced, were the first clear evidence of an operational command post inside that mountain. The next 10 seconds changed everything. A flash erupted near the leftmost door. Not artillery. Not RPG backblast. A camera flash. Are they photographing me? Reeves muttered, but that made no sense. The Raptor was nearly invisible from above or below. Then a second flash. Control, I'm seeing anomalous light from the structure. Could be signaling. The drone operator's voice grew tight. Raptor 1, execute egress. We're picking up movement on adjacent slopes, possible lookout posts. Reeves pulled hard on the stick, climbing with a force that pushes vision to its edge. The Raptor roared upward. The valley tried to hold on to him, but the engines overpowered everything. Then the radio crackled. Raptor 1, be advised, lookouts are using mirrors. They're tracking your approach vector. Reeves blinked, confused. Mirrors? Old-school signaling devices? The type British scouts used in the 1800s? The type Afghan tribes had used for centuries to warn each other across mountains? It made sense. The insurgents didn't need radar. They didn't need electronics. All they needed was a glint of reflected moonlight bouncing from lookout to lookout. A network of human eyes. Primitive. Effective. Copy. Returning to base. As he flew back into the open sky, the mountains finally released their grip on his sensors. Radar returned to life. Communications stabilized. The cockpit no longer felt haunted. Back at Bagram, the intel team surrounded him as soon as he stepped off the ladder. Did they spot you? Reeves nodded. Not with radar. With mirrors. The room went silent, because in that moment, the Air Force realized something that would shape the next 20 years of covert air operations. A stealth jet could defeat every modern sensor on the planet, but it could still be betrayed by moonlight on a piece of glass. That haunting truth became the catalyst of the next 3 missions. Operations where the Raptor would evolve from a high-altitude guardian into a shadow that learned to move through mountains the way insurgents moved through caves. The war was changing, and Reeves knew he had only flown the first chapter of a story the world would never fully see. The second mission that brought the F-22 Raptor into the Afghan theater didn't begin with intelligence from satellites or human sources. It began with a pattern, one that the analysts at the CIA Kabul station had been tracking for months. Every 8 to 10 nights, just before moonrise, a small convoy would appear on the Waziristan frontier. The vehicles were always different. Sometimes Toyota Hilux pickups, sometimes battered flatbed trucks, sometimes even mule teams carrying burlap sacks, but the pattern was identical. They emerged from the mountains, moved quickly for roughly 20 minutes, and then disappeared into a region so rugged that even modified drones struggled to maintain a stable feed. What made this convoy different was that every time it appeared, something happened days later. A bombing in Khost, an ambush on a U.S. supply route, an Al-Qaeda courier captured with fresh codes in his pocket. The analysts called it the pulse route, because every time the convoy moved, violence followed, like a heartbeat pumping blood into an insurgency that refused to die. By 2004, JSOC planners had decided this route had to be cut, but cutting it required eyes in the sky that insurgents couldn't detect and speed that no other aircraft offered. That meant bringing the Raptor back. Major Reeves had just returned from a rotation of routine air patrols when he was summoned into a secure tent on the east side of Bagram. The tent was cold, lit only by a few flickering screens, and filled with the faint iron smell of metal racks and unwashed flight suits. Inside were 3 people Reeves didn't expect to see: a JSOC targeteer, a CIA paramilitary liaison, and a tech officer from Air Combat Command. Reeves, the JSOC officer said, sliding a folder across the table. We have a convoy that keeps slipping past everything we've got. We want you to run an invisible intercept. Reeves flipped through the pages. The route was narrow, hugging cliff edges so tight that even an AC-130 gunship couldn't safely maneuver. MQ-1 Predators were too slow. F-15s and F-16s were too loud and too visible. You want me to drop low enough to ID vehicles visually? Reeves asked. The CIA liaison shook her head. Lower. We want you to pace them. Reeves looked up. Pace them? You'll be flying above and behind them, she explained. High enough to stay unseen, low enough to avoid satellite dead zones, and with enough sensor resolution to classify individuals in the back seats. Reeves understood the implication immediately. You're asking me to do ISR with a jet built for air combat. We're asking you, the JSOC officer said, to stop a war. The mission began just before 2300. Reeves launched from Bagram with minimal lights, minimal comms chatter, and a flight plan that officially didn't exist. The night sky over the Afghanistan-Pakistan frontier was a vast black ocean, and beneath it was a labyrinth of valleys where sound traveled in strange ways, whispers echoing for miles while engine noise vanished behind jagged stone. At 36,000 feet, the Raptor was a silent shark drifting through darkness. Reeves toggled the sensor package into a classified hybrid mode, thermal, passive radar mapping, and long-range electro-optical zoom. On his HUD, the ground wasn't a landscape. It was a glowing diagram of heat sources, movement trails, and topographic outlines. There they are, he whispered. 3 vehicles, 2 pickups, 1 older cargo truck, moving along a trail no wider than a ditch. No headlights, just a faint, pulsing glow of engines working against gravity. Predator operators from Nevada joined the feed. Raptor 1, we have you on composite. You're invisible on ground lookouts, as expected. Reeves kept the jet angled at a shallow descent, reducing signature, minimizing turbulence. He wasn't flying like a fighter pilot tonight. He was flying like a shadow. The convoy veered west toward a choke point known to the intel community as Ridge 10. The ridge was infamous, a steep rock funnel where countless insurgent smugglers disappeared beyond sensor reach. But tonight, something was different. Raptor 1, the drone operator said, we're seeing a 4th heat signature trailing the convoy. Small, fast-moving, on foot. Reeves zoomed the optical feed. A lone man, wearing a thick shawl and carrying a radio pack, was sprinting along a parallel goat path. He wasn't escorting the convoy. He was scouting ahead. A lookout. Control, be advised. Reeves said, that runner has comms gear. Copy. Looks like a human early warning system. They're using runners instead of radios to avoid intercept. Reeves felt a knot in his stomach. This wasn't just a convoy. It was a chain network. Runners at the front. Vehicles in the middle. Lookouts on the cliffs. The same old method Afghan tribes had used for centuries, now supporting 21st century warfare. But then something else happened. The runner stopped abruptly. He turned toward the sky. Reeves stiffened. There was no way the man could see the Raptor. No way he could hear it. No radar, no light, no contrails. And yet the runner lifted something shiny. A piece of mirror. Reeves cursed under his breath. Not again. The runner angled the mirror toward the moonlight, flashing coded signals toward the convoy. Raptor 1. The CIA liaison said over comms, we need immediate classification. If he's warning the convoy, they'll scatter. Reeves dove. It wasn't a reckless dive. More like a surgical descent with the engines feathered and noise suppressed, and G-forces kept just below blackout levels. The Raptor sliced through cold air, closing the gap between stealth and visibility. He dropped low enough for the electro-optical system to scan the runner's face. Tie-in confirmed, the CIA liaison said. That's Khalid S. Courier we've been tracking since Kos bombing. JSOC confirms high value. The stakes had just doubled. The Raptor wasn't authorized to engage with missiles. Too loud, too visible, too political. But it had another tool, one never publicly acknowledged, a classified electronic warfare burst designed to disrupt communications and overload low-quality radio receivers. Raptor 1, the JSOC officer said, Prepare EW Delta Burst. 2-second release. Reeves aligned the jet. The runner was still signaling. Still trying to warn the convoy. He pressed the trigger. The jet unleashed a silent wave, unheard, invisible, but powerful enough to fry the runner's radio pack and blind the convoy's short-range transceivers. The runner staggered back, clutching his equipment as sparks flickered. Seconds later, the convoy braked. Men jumped out. Confusion spread. Someone yelled. Another fired a shot into the air. Reeves powered upward. Control, EW burst successful. Convoy disrupted. The CIA liaison's voice was calm. Stand by. Ground JSOC team approaching from south. Reeves circled high above as dust trails appeared in the valley below. U.S. Special Operators, moving fast, moving quiet, close in. Then, without warning, headlights erupted on a parallel ridge. A second convoy. Raptor 1. The drone operator shouted. You've got a shadow column. Unknown assets, likely reinforcements. The Raptor turned sharply, angling sensors toward the new threat. The vehicles were larger, heavier, armored in a crude, improvised way. These weren't smugglers. These were fighters. And they were racing to intercept the JSOC team. 5. The line between stealth and intervention. Reeves had no weapons authorization, but he had altitude, speed, and precision sensors. He dipped low, scanning the shadow column. Control. Second convoy has RPGs, multiple fighters in the back. They'll overrun JSOC in 90 seconds. The comms went silent for a heartbeat. Then, Raptor 1, you are cleared for intimidation maneuver only. No kinetic engagement. That meant one thing. A sonic intimidation pass, executed low enough to generate shock and confusion without causing direct casualties. Reeves rolled the jet, descended to an altitude no one had attempted in these mountains with a stealth aircraft, and punched the throttles. The Raptor tore through the valley like a ghost erupting into thunder. The shock wave slammed into the shadow convoy. Fighters stumbled. One truck veered off the ridge, tumbling into darkness. The others braked hard, disoriented and unsure if they were under attack. To them, it must have felt like the sky itself had screamed. Below, the JSOC team seized a disrupted first convoy, capturing 2 couriers and recovering encrypted documents stuffed into the lining of a duffel bag. Raptor 1, the CIA liaison said, voice steadier now. Mission success. Pulse route interrupted. Reeves climbed back toward the stars, the valley shrinking below him into a black scar carved through ancient stone. 6. The aftermath no one saw. Back at Bagram, Reeves removed his helmet slowly. His face was pale, sweat tracing lines down dust-covered cheeks. The JSOC officer approached. You just shut down a supply route that's been killing our guys for years. Reeves didn't answer. He stared at the mission map, at the ridge where the truck fell, at the place where the runner had held up a mirror, trying to warn fighters who never heard the warning. Sir, Reeves finally said, they're adapting faster than we are. The officer nodded. That's why we're adapting too. But Reeves wasn't reassured. He had flown stealth missions designed for war jets. Now he was hunting convoys in mountain passes. He was jamming runners with mirrors. He was scaring fighters off cliffs with shock waves instead of missiles. This wasn't the war the Raptor was built for, but it was the war it found itself in. And deep down, Reeves knew this was only the beginning, because insurgents learned quickly, and the mountains learned faster. By late 2006, the war had entered a new and volatile phase. Insurgents were no longer scattered cells reacting to U.S. pressure. They were networks, adaptable, decentralized, more disciplined than the American public was allowed to believe. And one particular network, operating deep in the Kunar-Nuristan corridor, had become a ghost inside the mountains. They controlled lookouts. They mapped U.S. patrol schedules. They predicted drone patterns with uncanny accuracy, switching couriers in tunnels according to the smallest shifts in American behavior. They weren't technologically advanced, far from it, but they understood terrain the way sailors understand currents. The CIA called them the Lattice. The Lattice's power came from their ability to blind U.S. ISR assets. Drones would lose line of sight. Satellites would return nothing but shadow distortion. Special forces teams would find cave entrances that led nowhere. Rumor had it that one of their commanders had once studied Soviet signals doctrine in the 1980s, but no one could confirm it. When 3 U.S. Marines died in a coordinated ambush on a trail that had been cleared hours earlier, JSOC and the CIA agreed. The lattice had to be broken. And the only aircraft with the sensors, altitude control, and stealth profile capable of seeing into those mountains without being seen was once again the F-22 Raptor. Reeves sat in a cramped briefing room at Bagram, sipping bitter coffee that tasted like burned sand. The air conditioner hummed weakly, barely pushing back the heat. Around him, officers from 3 agencies argued quietly over rules of engagement. The target wasn't a convoy this time. It was an entire communication network built into mountainside, lookout posts spaced every few kilometers, using reflective signals, flares, and timed runners to guide movements through the valleys. The CIA officer pointed at a grainy satellite image. This is their backbone. Lookouts here, and here. They see everything. They hear everything. They warn everything. A JSOC planner leaned forward. We need them blind. All at once. Reeves frowned. You want synchronized disruption? No, the planner replied. We want total blackout. The room fell silent. Total? Reeves asked. Every lookout, every relay, every runner's position. One strike. One night, they wake up with the mountains deaf and blind. Reeves exhaled. And you want a Raptor to conduct the sweep. The CIA officer nodded. Your passive sensors can find heat signatures inside brush. Your radar mapping can detect cave openings at oblique angles. And your EW burst can disrupt analog devices without leaving electronic fingerprints. Reeves looked at the ridgeline on the screen. It was a monstrous thing. Jagged peaks like broken teeth, black voids where valleys vanish into darkness. I'll need to fly below ridge height for half of this, he said. That's suicide. That's why we asked you. At 0207 hours, Reeves lifted off from Bagram into a starless sky. Clouds smothered the moon, turning Afghanistan into a mass of ink below him. The Raptor climbed silently, then dipped low as Reeves approached the first ridge of the Kinner Corridor. The valley was so narrow that the Raptor's wings seemed almost too wide. Mountain winds hammered the fuselage. The HUD flickered as thermal updrafts and violent cross-currents distorted sensor readings. But the Raptor compensated, micro-adjustments across control surfaces, stabilizing like a hawk riding a violent storm. The CIA liaison's voice crackled through Reeves' headset. Raptor 1. You are entering Grid Alpha. First objective is Lookout Post 7. Reeves switched to passive thermal mapping. A faint glow appeared on the HUD. 3 human shapes, huddled around a small fire built behind a boulder to mask signal. One lookout raised binoculars. Another adjusted a mirror panel resting on a tripod. Control, Reeves said, Lookout 7 confirmed. Proceed to disable. Reeves lowered the jet even further. Engines throttled to the bare minimum needed to maintain lift. He wasn't flying so much as gliding. A steel feather drifting between mountains older than recorded history. At 800 feet, he activated the first EW burst. Below, the mirror panel cracked. The binoculars sparked. The men jerked back, shouting. One fell to his knees, clutching his ears as the analog distortion wave rolled over them like an invisible tide. Lookout 7 went dark. Reeves powered forward. Minutes later, Lookout Post 8 appeared on sensors, for men, a donkey, and a set of reflective plates arranged in a semicircle. But before Reeves could act, one of the men stood abruptly and fired a flare toward the sky. A bright, blinding ball of white light burst above the ridge. Raptor 1, the drone operator said. The network is reacting. Looks like Post 7 warned them before going down. Reeves pulled up. How the hell did they warn anyone? I fried all their equipment. They didn't use equipment, the CIA liaison said. They used fire. A second flare shot up from a ridge farther east. Then a third. Then a fourth. Lookouts were launching prearranged signals into the night sky. A primitive, yet brutally effective, alarm system. Raptor 1, The JSOC officer said, "You need to shut them down before the entire lattice mobilizes. Accelerate sweep." Reeves swallowed hard. "Copy." He banked the Raptor so sharply that G-forces press him into seat, like a cement block. The jet dropped into a canyon so narrow that the cockpit shook with warning vibrations. The Raptor was not designed for this. But tonight, it was forced to become something else entirely. Reeves skimmed the canyon floor, using terrain-following radar only in micropulses to avoid detection. The walls flashed past mere meters away. Dark rock, twisted pines, occasional abandoned Soviet fighting positions rusting in silence. Then the sensors lit up. Heat signatures, 6 of them, hidden under a camouflage tarp. Runners, sleeping in shifts, ready to carry messages the moment a flare went up. Not tonight. Reeves hit the EW burst. The tarp flipped violently. Men stumbled out, clutching their heads as their low-tech radios sparked and died. He accelerated. Lookout 10 blinded. Lookout 11 disrupted. Lookout 12 scrambled. Each target erased another piece of the lattice. Each disruption frayed the insurgents' ghost network. But the mountains were waking up. Reeves saw distant flashes. Insurgents launching more flares, lighting signal fires, banging metal sheets together to create echoes across valleys. A communication system older than electricity, but faster than the Americans had anticipated. The lattice was fighting back with centuries-old tools. And the Raptor was struggling to keep up. As Reeves approached the final ridge, alarms screamed inside the cockpit. "Raptor 1, we're detecting heat anomalies on the cliffside," the drone operator warned. Reeves looked down. RPG teams. On the ridge. At the exact altitude he needed to cross. Someone had predicted his flight path. "Control, I got hostiles with launchers, multiple positions." The CIA liaison's voice tensed. "Raptor 1, you cannot take a direct hit in that valley. Evade. Now." Reeves snapped the jet sideways, clipping the edge of a wind shear pocket as the first RPG streaked from the cliff. It spiraled through the air, missing his wing by less than 20 meters. The second RPG launched. Then a third. Then a fourth. They weren't trying to hit him. They were trying to force him upward, into Lookout 15's line of sight. Reeves realized the trap too late. As the Raptor climbed, a blinding white light flashed from a ridge, an industrial spotlight powered by a generator, aimed at the sky. A primitive anti-air system. The light wasn't designed to damage the jet. It was designed to blind the sensors. Reeves' HUD flickered. Thermal maps distorted. Radar pulses returned nonsense. The jet was flying half-blind. "Raptor 1, your signature is shifting," the drone operator shouted. "You're entering blackout." Reeves fought the controls, relying on instinct and terrain familiarity. He couldn't see the lookout. He couldn't see the ridge. He couldn't see anything. So he closed his eyes for 1 second, replaying the map in his mind. Then he dove. Straight down. The Raptor plunged beneath the beam, sensors stabilizing as the glare fell behind him. Reeves leveled out meters above the canyon floor. The spotlight couldn't track him fast enough. He triggered the final EW burst. The generator exploded in a shower of sparks. The spotlight went dark. Lookout 15 went silent. Reeves pulled the jet into a climb, emerging above the mountains just as dawn began to bleed across the horizon. The lattice was broken. Reeves landed at Bagram at 0541 hours. His legs trembled as he stepped off the ladder. The JSOC officer approached him, fatigue etched in his face. "You just blinded half the insurgency's mountain network in one night," the officer said quietly. "Do you understand what that means?" Reeves nodded slowly. "It means," he answered, "they'll build another one." The officer didn't deny it, because everyone knew the truth. For every system the Americans disrupted, the insurgents created another, simpler, quieter, harder to detect. Reeves rubbed his temples. "We're fighting ghosts," he said. "No," the CIA liaison replied softly. "We're fighting people who know their home better than we ever will." Reeves walked away from the jet, feeling the weight of the mountains still pressing against his chest. Tonight, the mountains had gone blind, but they wouldn't stay blind forever. And he knew the next mission was coming, one that would push the Raptor farther than any designer had dared to imagine. By early 2009, the war had shifted again. The Taliban had reorganized, Al-Qaeda fighters were bleeding across the frontier, and Pakistan's tribal belt had become a maze of alliances no one, not CIA, not JSOC, not the Afghan NDS, could fully map. But one thing became clear. Someone inside the insurgent network was learning. Intercept patterns changed. Convoys moved at irregular hours. Lookouts abandoned mirrors and signal fires. Safe houses rotated weekly instead of monthly. This wasn't just adaptation. It was counter-adaptation. A chess match where both sides kept switching boards. And then came the breakthrough. An intercepted message, found in a courier's pocket after a firefight in Paktika. The Americans have a bird we cannot see, but it sees us. We must hide inside the mountain. No one knew it then, but this sentence would trigger one of the most dangerous covert air missions of the war. It started with a faint thermal anomaly spotted by an MQ-9 Reaper in late spring. The drone had been scanning a valley near the Pakistan border when the sensor operator noticed a pulse of heat deep beneath a rock shelf. Not a fire, not a vehicle, something else. The anomaly repeated every 23 minutes. Too regular to be natural, too subtle to be accidental. The CIA sent the data to analysts in Langley, who ran it through algorithms built to detect nuclear facilities, submarine vents, and Soviet bunker exhausts. The signature matched none of those, but it matched something else. A ventilation shaft with a heat sink system. Someone had built a subterranean command center deep inside the mountains. It was sophisticated. Far too sophisticated for tribal fighters living in mud compounds. This had to be an Al-Qaeda strategic cell, possibly a foreign-engineered one. But to confirm the shaft location, the U.S. needed an aircraft that could see into rock shadows without alerting anyone below. The only candidate was the F-22 Raptor, and only one pilot had flown the narrow valleys enough to attempt it, Reeves. The planning room was quiet when Reeves entered. Not tense, quiet. The kind of quiet that settles over people who know they're about to ask for the impossible. The JSOC commander tapped the satellite map. This is what we're calling Site Blackglass. We believe it's a deep tunnel system with reinforced chambers, possibly built using old Soviet mining equipment. Reeves studied the topography. The rock formations were brutal. Sheer cliffs, needle ridges, dead-end canyons. A terrain designed for birds, not jets. You want me to look inside that shadow? Reeves asked. The CIA liaison nodded. We need confirmation of the shaft's shape, depth, and entrance geometry. Drones can't get close without being heard. Satellites can't get the angle. Why me? He asked. Because, the JSOC officer said, you've already flown closer to rock than anyone in the program. Reeves sighed. What's the catch? Then the liaison answered. The only angle that works is less than 30 meters from the cliff face. Reeves stared. 30 meters? That's not a flight path. That's threading a needle. We know. And there's no margin for microweather, wind shear, downdraft, nothing. We know. Reeves rubbed his forehead. If I misjudge my airspeed by 1 knot. You won't, the officer said. We trust you. Reeves laughed bitterly. That's what scares me. The Raptor lifted off at 0241. No external lights. No radio chatter. No acknowledgement from the tower. The jet vanished into the night. At 30,000 feet, Reeves oriented the aircraft toward a valley so narrow it barely appeared on standard aviation charts. Turbulence hit instantly, violent, chaotic, unpredictable. The Raptor compensated, but this time even the onboard computers struggled. Mountain winds slammed the fuselage. Cold air knifed across the wings. Downdrafts punched the jet downward like an invisible fist. Reeves whispered, "Easy, easy." He descended to 5,000 feet, then 3,000, then 1,500. The cliffs loomed like black monoliths, jagged teeth reaching into the sky. Raptor 1, the drone operator said quietly, "You're entering the shadow zone. Satellite coverage 0. Predator feed intermittent. You're essentially alone." Reeves exhaled slowly. "Copy. Executing low-skin pattern." He banked the jet sideways, almost fully vertical, so the wingtip missed the cliff by what felt like inches. Then he activated the modified ground imaging radar in oblique penetration mode. The HUD flickered. Static. Grain. Then a shape. A hollow area inside the rock. A large one. Control, Reeves murmured. I've got void detection. About 60 meters deep. Structure appears reinforced. He angled lower. The jet groaned. Air screamed past the canopy. Then the radar captured it clearly. A perfect circular shaft carved into stone. It wasn't natural. It wasn't a cave. It was engineered. And it was still warm. This is it, Reeves said. Sight black glass confirmed. Then something happened no one in the control room had anticipated. A flash of heat. An electronic ping. A momentary spike in the electromagnetic spectrum. It lasted less than a second, but Reeves saw it. Control, I'm reading a burst. Possibly encrypted. Looks like a short-range beacon. The CIA liaison's voice sharpened. Repeat that. It's gone now, but it came from inside the shaft. A beacon meant technology. Technology meant power source. Power source meant people were inside. And if people were inside, they might be monitoring. Raptor 1, Control said, you may have been detected. Reeves kept the Raptor angled along the cliff. They can't detect me electronically, he said. No, the CIA liaison replied, but they might have detected the reflection of your sensor beam off the shaft wall. Reeves froze. A reflection, a glint, a shimmer, just like the mirror signals used by lookouts. Control, he whispered. I think they have light sensors. I think they saw my beam bounce. A sudden flare erupted from inside the cliff. Then another. Then a third. Raptor 1 abort. They're firing illumination rounds. Reeves yanked the stick. The Raptor snapped upward. A flare burst just below the jet. White fire lighting the valley like daylight. Another crackled above, showering sparks like a star dying. Then a rumble. Not artillery. Not RPGs. Explosives inside the mountain. He's collapsing the entrance, the drone operator yelled. Reeves didn't hesitate. He jammed the throttle, climbing out of the valley just as the entire rock face convulsed. A shock wave thundered upward. Dust exploded into the sky. Chunks of stone the size of cars tumbled down, where the Raptor had been seconds earlier. Below, the entrance to sight black glass vanished under a landslide. They weren't trying to hit him. They were trying to bury their own secrets. Back at Bagram, Reeves stood in front of the screen showing the before and after imagery. Before, a faint shadow where a shaft hid inside the cliff. After, a scar collapsed rock. The JSOC commander rubbed his temples. They knew we were watching, he said. They knew exactly what to destroy. Reeves nodded. Someone in there knew our sensor profile. The CIA liaison frowned. Do you think they had outside help? Reeves looked at the imagery, at the precision with which the tunnel had been sealed. Not help, he said slowly. Training. The room went quiet. Training from where? Someone asked. Reeves didn't answer. Because he didn't know. And because the possibilities were worse than ignorance. Chinese engineers. Pakistani intelligence elements. Former Soviet miners. Foreign fighters who had studied Western ISR doctrine. Whoever they were, they had just erased one of the most important intelligence leads in months, right under the nose of the most advanced stealth aircraft in existence. Later that night, Reeves sat alone on a metal bench near the hangar. The Raptor loomed behind him, silent and perfect. A machine built to dominate skies was being used to chase ghosts inside mountains. A jet designed to defeat next-generation enemy aircraft was being asked to identify holes in rock. He had flown into a valley no aircraft had ever entered. He had confirmed a target no satellite could see. He had watched an entire command center collapse itself to avoid being captured. And yet, he didn't feel victorious. A voice startled him. You did everything we asked, the CIA liaison said, sitting beside him. Reeves didn't look up. They're evolving faster than we can map. She nodded. The war is teaching them, just like it's teaching us. Reeves exhaled. This isn't sustainable. None of this ever was. she replied softly. He looked out at the dark horizon where mountains blended with sky. Somewhere out there, beneath tons of rock, an insurgent cell had erased itself in seconds, simply to deny the Americans a glimpse into their operations. Reeves realized something profound then. The war on terror wasn't a contest of weapons. It was a contest of detection, of who could see whom first, of who could disappear faster. And tonight, the mountains had disappeared before his eyes. By 2011, the war had become a storm of contradictions. U.S. forces were drawing down in some provinces, while escalating in others. The Al-Qaeda network was fractured, yet its fragments were more unpredictable than ever. The insurgency wasn't dying. It was mutating, slipping into new valleys, new alliances, new silences. And in those silences, something stirred again. It began with a human source and cost. A middle-aged shopkeeper, a man who had survived both the Soviet occupation and the Civil War, walked into an NDS outpost carrying a hand-drawn map. He claimed that deep in the mountains, far beyond the roads American forces dared to patrol, there was a new kind of tunnel complex. Not a cave, not a Soviet mine. Something different. He described men carrying crates at night, strange machinery humming beneath the earth, and, most troubling, foreign accents echoing inside the mountain. NDS officers believed him enough to pass the map to the CIA. And the CIA believed it enough to send it to Bagram Airfield, where Reeves was called back once more. The briefing room felt heavier than usual, as if the air itself carried the weight of the last decade. Maps covered the table. Analysts murmured. JSOC planners argued quietly over satellite angles. The CIA liaison was the one who finally spoke. "We think this is a relocation site," she said, "built after Black Glass collapsed." Reeves felt a chill. "They rebuilt." "They didn't rebuild," she answered. "They evolved." She projected the map onto the wall. A jagged line representing a valley, two ridges intersecting at a narrow pass. And at the end, an X drawn by the shopkeeper. "This is deeper than anything we've seen. Multiple chambers. Reinforced ventilation. And based on acoustic analysis from drones that attempted to pass overhead." She clicked to the next slide. The room fell silent. A spectrogram appeared. Peaks, troughs, and a distinct harmonic tremor. Reeves frowned. Machinery? Industrial machinery. Foreign. She nodded softly. "We suspect Pakistani intelligence elements may be assisting. Could be Chinese mining consultants. Could be remnants of Chechen fighters with engineering backgrounds. We just don't know." Reeves studied the map. The valley was a nightmare. Narrow, unpredictable winds. Elevation changes that could tear a jet apart. "You want visual confirmation?" Reeves asked. "No," JSOC replied. "We want full interior mapping." Reeves blinked. "You're asking a fighter aircraft to conduct subterranean imaging?" The officer nodded. "Your modified radar band can penetrate shallow rock, enough to give us chamber outlines. That's not what it was designed for. But it works." Reeves rubbed his forehead. "What altitude?" The officer hesitated. "Lower than Black Glass." Reeves stared. "Lower? Are you insane?" "We're out of options," the CIA liaison said. "If this is an external support node, we need proof. Congress won't authorize action without it." Reeves leaned back. "So I fly into a canyon that eats helicopters, thread a stealth jet below ridge height, and scan a tunnel system built to hide from everything we have." "That's correct," she said quietly. "And if the winds shift by 1 degree, you won't survive." JSOC finished. Silence. Reeves closed his eyes for a moment. "Then I'll do it." The mission was codenamed Operation Echo Lantern. Reeves launched just after 0100. The night was moonless. The mountains below were darker than ink, shapes without edges, shadows without depth. Somewhere in that darkness, a network was waiting, watching, listening. At 20,000 feet, Reeves activated passive sensors. At 12,000, the winds began to fight him. At 8,000, turbulence became violent. He descended anyway. The valley was so narrow the Raptors' wings cast shadows on both walls at once. Cold air roared against the canopy. The cockpit trembled as if the jet itself feared where it was being taken. "Control," Reeves whispered, entering primary corridor. "Copy, Raptor 1. We have no ISR above you. Too many blind zones. You're on your own." Reeves throttled down. He raised a nose. He began the first mapping pass. Radar pulsed. The HUD flickered. A shape appeared inside the rock. Then another, and another. Large chambers. Rectangular. Reinforced supports in a grid. This wasn't tribal engineering. It was industrial. Control? I've got 3 chambers. Large. Equipment inside. Unidentified. The CIA liaison's voice came through, tense. "Any signs of personnel?" Reeves angled the Raptor slightly, adjusting sensors. Multiple warm signatures. At least 20. Uniform movement. Organized. Then something unexpected appeared on the HUD. A massive void. Much deeper than the others. "What is that?" Reeves whispered. "Describe it," Control said. It's a main chamber. Nearly 90 meters long." He scanned deeper. Shapes appeared inside. Large shapes. Crates. Generators. And he felt his stomach turn. What looked like a long, tubular metal structure. Not a missile. Not a weapon. Something older. Something worse. "Control, that's mining equipment." The room back at Bagram fell silent. "They're not hiding," Reeves said. "They're excavating." "For what?" the liaison asked. Reeves scanned the void again. The radar returned a faint, unnatural geometry beneath the chamber. A tunnel, leading deeper. As he adjusted the angle, an alert flashed, a heat signature, moving fast. "Control, I got multiple individuals exiting the shaft, fast. They know something." Then a second alarm. Then a third. "They're powering equipment." Reeves shouted, "Something's activating." A burst of electromagnetic interference erupted from the chamber, strong enough to distort the Raptor sensors for a full second. In most missions, a second was nothing. Down here, it was death. Reeves steadied the jet. "Control, I'm reading EM activity. Possible jamming attempt." "Unknown origin?" the operator asked. "No, it's weight." A light flashed from the cliffside. Not a flare, not a spotlight. A mirror, a giant mirror panel, mounted on a pivot, angled toward the sky. A signal device. They weren't trying to blind the jet. They were marking its exact flight path. "Control," Reeves said voice tight, "I've been visually tagged." "Abort," the liaison shouted. "They'll bring weapons to bear." Reeves yanked the stick back. 2 RPGs streaked out a ridge. Then 3. Then 6. The Raptor swerved, the explosions lighting the canyon like lightning bolts. Reeves climbed. The jet shook violently. Alarm screamed. A third volley fired. Not RPGs this time. Mortars. "Control." Reeves shouted. "They got pre-sighted mortar tubes." He banked hard. A shell detonated meters below. Dust blasted upward. Rock shattered. The valley roared like a furnace. Another explosion. Then a shock wave. The Raptor lurched sideways. Warning lights flared. Reeves fought the controls with everything he had. Come on." He cleared the ridge by less than 10 meters. Silence returned. Terrifying, absolute silence. Hours later, Reeves sat in a darkened conference room. The atmosphere was grave, almost funereal. The CIA liaison leaned forward. "Your scans confirm a foreign-supported excavation." JSOC nodded. "And the mirror array proves they anticipated airborne reconnaissance." Reeves rubbed his temples. "They didn't anticipate reconnaissance. They anticipated me." The room froze. "What are you saying?" the officer asked. "That they studied the Raptor's patterns. Mine specifically. They guessed how I'd angle sensors. They built a mirror wall to catch the beam, to spot the reflection as it returned." The CIA liaison whispered. "They built a counter-stealth system, using light. Primitive, impossible, and yet perfect against the one weakness no engineer had considered." "What do we do now?" the JSOC officer asked. Reeves stared at the floor. "You stopped sending fighters into valleys," he said, "because the war doesn't belong to aircraft anymore. It belongs to terrain, to shadows, to people who live inside the rock." No one disagreed, because everyone understood the truth. The insurgents hadn't defeated the Raptor, but they had out-evolved it. That night, Reeves walked alone toward the hangar. The United States Air Force crew chiefs were performing silent maintenance checks. The Raptor stood under floodlights, sleek, flawless, immaculate, a machine born to challenge superpowers, now reduced to navigating caverns and shadows. Reeves placed a hand on the cold metal. "You weren't meant for this," he whispered. Footsteps sounded behind him, the CIA liaison. "You did more with this jet than anyone ever imagined," she said. Reeves didn't look up. "And yet the war keeps shifting beneath us." She nodded. "War always shifts." He studied the aircraft one last time. The wings, the intakes, the perfect angles, the flawless stealth coating. A weapon designed to dominate the air, forced to fight a war underground. Reeves turned and walked away.